This week, Tim Malc from WireSpeed is with us to discuss automating the SOC and measuring quality at scale. Then Ali Mellon from Forrester Research joins us to talk about all things security operations. Finally, in the enterprise security news, we talk about 5 acquisitions, Tynes gets funding, new tools and DFIR reports to check out, a legal precedent that could hurt AI companies, AI garbage is in your code repos, but that's okay. Your code was already garbage. The dark side of security leadership, HIPAA fines are broken, Salt Typhoon is having a great time here in the US, and WTF is ZAS. We'll find out. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. IT professionals, mark your calendars. Zero Trust World 2025 is happening in Orlando, Florida, February 19th to the 21st. This event is tailored for IT leaders and cybersecurity experts who want actionable insights on zero trust strategies, practical solutions for modern threats, and meaningful connections with industry peers. Plus, take advantage of hands-on cyber hero boot camps, expert-led sessions, and the chance to earn CPE credits and your cyber hero certificate. Save $200 on your in-person registration using discount code ZTWSW25 at securityweekly.com/ZTW2025. Reserve your spot now. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Cheddar Day. It's also National Tortellini Day, but I'm pretty sure they don't use cheddar and tortellini, and I think the National Day folks should do a better job of coordinating these things. This is episode 394, recorded on Thursday, February 13th, 2025. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today is the Dean of Data Science, the Knight of Neurodiversity, the Watcher of Data Center Waste, Jackie McGuire. How you doing, Jackie?
Hey. I am okay. This is the embarrassing in-between phase, so people get a behind-the-scenes look of what is required to keep my hair the crazy colors that it is. And that's why I look like some type of great value strawberry shortcake at the moment.
It looks like we got some kind of sepia tone filter going on your camera.
It's not a good look. Untoned bleached hair it belongs in trailers usually.
Mine is just the natural colors of original and new. Original Adrian.
So jealous of the locks.
And the gray ever encroaches into both the beard and the hair. But I can't complain about my hair. That wouldn't be fair.
I'm sitting.
I like how the grays come in. Yeah, Tim especially doesn't want to hear me complain about hair.
I've been shaving it for 15 something years now. So I gave up a long time ago. Yeah.
All right, a few announcements, and then we'll jump into the interview. Security Weekly listeners can save $100 on their 2025 full conference pass to the RSA conference. RSA will take place April 28th through May 1st in San Francisco and on demand. To register using our discount code, you can visit securityweekly.com/RSAC25 and use the code 5U5SecWeekly. That's 5U5SecWeekly. We hope to see you there. We also like to remind you to give us some feedback if you enjoy this podcast. You can subscribe, like, and comment if the platform you're on supports those things. We're on a whole bunch of different platforms. Tell us how we could do better, or guests you'd like to see on the show, or comments on Jackie's hair. We got one of those the other day. And
we'll get to that later.
that particular guy, you can also choose not to comment. That's also an option. All right. Today's topic is evolving the SOC. We're excited to have Tim Malc with us today. Tim is the co-founder and CEO of WireSpeed. You might also know him because he built the red team at Walmart, or from his time at Cyderis, which I think is how you say that. Yeah. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Excited about this. We have kind of a security operations special going on today with you and Ali Mellon coming next for the next interview. And yeah, so some exciting stuff here, not just about security operations, but about figuring out quality at scale. This is something that I've spent a lot of time on, but maybe kind of bring us up to date. Like how did you come to start WireSpeed? I mentioned a few bits of your history, but what was the genesis for this?
Man, it's where to begin. I would say one thing always leads to another. And every single job that you ever take, every role should always build on it, and you should pull something from that role to the next, the next, the next. And for me, it's I think that'd be probably fascinating for this audience is when I was doing red team work. Once upon a time, the blue team started getting really good and started actually containing us in a matter of hours. And we'd spend weeks and weeks and weeks building infrastructure, perfect payloads. Everything was clean. Everything was custom. Did all the nth level of work to make this happen. And then when they started containing us faster and faster, I turned to my team and I said, we have to start thinking in an algorithm. We're going to be on the clock. We have to race. We have to do stuff. And we started automating stuff on our red team side. When we got access, let's automate and collect. And I remember the conversation well. There's a fun, if you're curious, there's a blog about that story. Red Teamers Thinking in Algorithms on the WireSpeed blog. And I remember having this conversation, and some of my senior guys are like, "What are you talking about? I can't do this." I was like, I'm not thinking in algorithms. I was like, what are you doing? He goes, well, when I get the shell, I just have to feel the shell. And I was like, what do you mean feel the shell? And I had a whole round and back with him, and we started whiteboarding it out. And at the end of that, I got him to realize that he was in fact thinking in an algorithm, and we could define it, and then we could write software, and then we could go implement it. Now I tell you that because I fast forward many years later, and I'm sitting in the middle of a SOC that's having trouble keeping up with the volume. And we start talking to the analysts, and we say, okay, what do we need to do? Like, let's walk through how you work every case. And they said, well, I don't really know. I have to see every case one at a time. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, it's the same conversation. I'm having the same thing, but now I'm having it on the blue team side. It's like, after spending some time with them, I got them to realize, oh no, you're thinking in an algorithm too. And so what I did is I spent some time, built out the algorithm, like how I would work every single case in a giant flow chart, graphed it out. You zoom out, it looks like a crazy integrated circuit. And then WireSpeed was born out of that. We just started implementing that. And that's kind of the story how we got there. So I've spent my time backing and forth between offense and defense, and I like both sides. I like to be near the sharp edge of cyber, I guess is probably a good way to put it.
Yeah, that's it's something that's occurred to me several times over my career that a lot of security folks don't have that engineering background, don't think that way in terms of, how could I take my workflow and automate it, make it more efficient? I actually worked with a pen tester who thought that way. He did have an engineering dev background, and he's built a bunch of tools. I think he's still over at Trusted Sec these days. He's still doing pen testing, but he's built dozens of tools over the years, mostly around automating pen testing. And
probably making his own life better, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you know Adam Compton, but that's who I'm talking about. Yeah. And I remember the Equifax breach. There's a lot of stories that come out of that, and I tell it a lot because I spent a lot of time analyzing it. And but one of the stories that comes out of that is the emerging threats team produces a snort rule, hands it off to the ops team who deploys it in the IDS, and neither team thinks to test the snort rule to see if it works or not, and it didn't. And just something as simple as that, I feel like, so to come to a question with this, how do security teams get better at that kind of thinking? Is there some training they can go off and get that, kind of helps them with this, where you're telling them to try and think in algorithms? Like, what would you recommend?
That's a really good question. I probably haven't thought about that question enough. I think it becomes a necessity. So you start getting pressure. You go through cases where you just weren't ready, or you had a process that was ready, but the process was slow and there's too many people, too many moving parts. And then you start thinking, how do I make this faster? How do I collect the data I need? I think cyber has largely been kind of trying to do this. I mean, SOAR was one example, right? The whole point of SOAR was to try to go collect that data and put it in front of an analyst so the analyst doesn't have to go pivot into 3 more tools. and we could, SOAR projects fail. I don't think they fail for the reasons that the industry thinks they fail. It's not because people like the barrier to entry for writing code or not writing code is a problem, or low code or no code or whatever. To me, they always fail because it's really hard to define good process and maintain good process. And I feel like that's one of the things that, like, that's one of the reasons why WireSpeed exists, is because we understand the process. We love process at the end of the day, and kind of nerdy about that. Sounded stupid coming out of my head just now, but that's kind of true how it works, right? So for an organization to think about this, man, I'd probably say, shoot, maybe take someone who's not cyber, not technical, like from that perspective, and have them come and look at your stuff and just question it from a fresh set of eyes. And I bet they're going to look at you and go, "Why are you doing this?" And then you're going to realize, oh man, I've got bias I didn't know I had.
It's interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, you have those.
Sorry,
say
Adrian,
that
I
again,
interrupted you. But so when I became a data scientist, I got hired at a SIM, and I didn't even know what a SIM was, and I'd never really worked in security. I'd worked in finance, but I was like, okay, if we're going to do detections, like, I literally was sitting, we were in a WeWork, so there was like 8 employees, and I was yelling to the CEO, okay, give me another process name. Give me like high risk processes, and just like having him give me a list of like, okay, if I'm looking around to do lateral movement, like what things am I going to hit? And just started writing detections like that. I think almost sometimes our education system doesn't necessarily keep up with technology, right? So people go to school and they learn theory from 10 to 20 years ago, and then you just kind of get into a SOC and learn how they do things. And I love like bringing someone in that has an outside perspective. So I always tell people it's all of my not security background that makes me good at what I do, because I bring not, 15 years worth of programming with this is always how it's been done, so this is how we do it.
Yeah, and I would say that right dovetail with that is, if you spend your entire career just doing defense, you get pigeonholed, you get blinders on, you don't realize how it works. When you spend all your time, and I'd say the same thing with the offense guys, a lot of times they have no idea how detections actually work. And they'll be red teamers for years and be prolific, but they don't understand the tech, like not just the technology of it, but maybe they don't understand the volume of it. So like, yes, this can in theory be instrumented. There's a big difference between instrumenting and recording something and it ending up in front of an analyst for a verdict, or in an automated verdict and then into an instant responder. That's a big, big, big difference. A lot of times they don't get it. So I think working just in general, bouncing around is good. Yeah. Fresh ideas.
Yeah, and speaking of some of the, like, there's so many tools here, SecOps, pandas, that a lot of people don't even know exist, don't know how to use those, like just scrubbing data, cleaning up data, so that you can do something useful with it. There's a whole tool chain there, which I'm awkwardly trying to make a segue into talking about AI. And, you just kind of presented what WireSpeed is, but you're not using AI at all. And I think that in itself is interesting, given almost everybody else I would put in the same bucket as you, in that same category, has it plastered across all their press releases in the front page of their website right now.
Yeah, this is a fun one. So in a prior role, I remember telling people one of the best things I accomplished was keeping the words machine learning off the website. Because I think everybody and their brother just writes it and puts it out there, and you've got it somewhere. Like, at the end of the day, we're not anti-AI. We think there's a place for all. By the way, AI is, as anyone smart knows, there's like, that means 100 different things, and there's different tools for different positions and different places. So we think there's a great place for large language models, as an example, which is really what the big Gen AI craze is all about. But we don't believe at all that Gen AI, or specifically large language models, are the right tool for assigning a verdict on a detection. We think it's crazy. And if for no other reason than the fancy $25 word that I'm going to drop right now, which is stochasticity, we think it's absolutely crazy. So for what the word means, for those that don't want to Google that or ask ChatGPT real quick, it just means intentional randomness. Right? And so, because I've explained this topic, I'm just doing it now. I'm gonna have a little meta moment here. I explain this all the time when I talk to customers and prospects, And I don't, as a human, like to repeat myself the exact same way every single time. That's a human trait. We don't like to do that. So in order to mimic that, we want intentional randomness in our large language models. Well, the problem is they start chasing tokens and going down the little trees that they can build. Eventually they go crazy and they can't count the number of R's in the word strawberry. Or if it's in the case of a large language model that's triaging your case, it's going to look at something and go, yeah, this is totally benign. The next thing you know, you're explaining to the board why you got ransomware. And that is the situation that we don't want to have. We feel that everything has to be absolutely deterministic, not non-deterministic. So every single time I have a certain scenario, a certain event happens, it should always result in the same response. If it doesn't, you can't prove that your security is correct. There's no sense of correctness. It's just complete random chaos. You might as well just flip coins all the time. So that predictability is really important to us. It's important to us in our unit testing and our regression testing and in our QA process, which I think you want to get to and talk about in a minute too, which is, you know, it's all about that. If you can't predict it and you can't repeat it, then you don't really know what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think your goals are different than these other companies that are plastering AI too. Like a lot of these are very quick to say we're not replacing humans, like we're providing enrichment, decision support, which AI, I think is fine for. Whereas you need a decision, so you need consistency. You need deterministic, right? you need the answer to the same question to be the same every time, which counts out this kind of technology, right?
I would also say go back and look at those same vendors just a year ago and see how much their messaging has changed in 1 year. There's about 6 or 7 companies we track in the space that do this. And a lot of them were positioned to basically say, we're going to have this agentic AI thing that is going to replace people. Eventually, it's going to replace people. Eventually, we're going to get there. It's going to take a portion of your load. And they started watering it down. And then you start hearing, it's going to handle 80% of your case volume. And the thing I'm seeing these same vendors do now is say, oh, it's going to level up your junior analyst to a senior analyst level. And we all, I think it's starting to wear off. I think people are starting to realize that it can't do everything that the original promise was going to happen. And I think you're going to see some consolidation in that space. And some of these are going to go out of business or they're just going to roll into other product companies because it's just not there.
And I'm seeing people now say, you know what, it's not even good for the junior people because when this does get it wrong, inevitably it does hallucinate. Or I learned a new term for this and I don't have it in front of me, but I'll pull it up in a second. But when it inevitably does get it wrong, the junior folks aren't going to realize it. They won't have the experience to spot, the bad responses to bullshit. So, even
it's like an
leveling up. Junior people. And it's what I've been saying from the beginning is, and all the proper studies on this have shown 10 to 20% productivity improvement from this technology for certain tasks. Right. And that's not bad. But everybody wants to go out and say 10x, and now they got to walk it all the way back to 20%, which 20% a day a week. Like that's huge. Yeah. Let's be happy with that, and happy where it provides some value. But let's not say it's going to save lives and 10x engineers.
Yeah, I think
also lose sight of the fact that if you're training data based on the past, like the nature of technology is that it's a continually forward-moving, evolving thing. And so while I think a lot of machine learning models are great at predicting outcomes with a fairly static database, unless you're going to completely retrain your model every time you integrate a new technology into your stack, its ability to predict future outcomes or not, identify novel threats. It's just, I really hate when people say we don't even know how these things work. It's like, no, we do. It's called a multidimensional matrix and they connect dots. And sometimes dots, I saw a thing that was talking about how non-dairy is closer to beef than it is to soy. So when you try to produce a non-dairy menu with AI, it puts a whole bunch of animal products because we use an animal term to describe non-dairy things. So I think I don't know, I agree. And I also think from a cost perspective, we're never going to get to a point where these massive models that are overtrained for the purpose we're using them for are going to be cost effective to use. So when basic automation like PID loops is really all you really need for a lot of this stuff, or I don't know, everything in the same time zone coming out of your firewalls.
Yeah, I think that there's this theme of we don't. By the way, if you look at the founders in this space, there's very few of them that have even worked in cyber before. They're all like math PhDs that have worked somewhere, and like the VC firm says, "Hey, why don't you? We want another Gen AI startup, so go look in cyber." And they're like, "Okay," and they go over there. And then I mean, I'm not going to drop names, but there is a certain founder that I was following, and he said, one day on a LinkedIn post of all places, "Hey, when you're evaluating solutions in this space, you need to prove that you're actually dealing with a vendor that knows how to use Gen AI and large language models. And in order to prove that, you should be able to change the process that you work a case on the fly." And I was like, hold on, time out. This is just too rich. Number one, I thought we were trying to solve cyber problems, not prove that we're using AI. Like I thought that was the first objective, right? And number two, if you don't understand the process for how to work a case, that probably means you shouldn't be working a case. Like you should know the process. And that's, again, going back to why I think SOAR failed, was because people didn't know the process, or they only knew the process to the extent to which they were trialed by fire, right, in their organization. And they get a slightly different variation on that. And then, I don't have an edge case for this. I don't have a conditional block for this. And I don't know what to do, right? And then you've got a bad scenario and you got to call in experts and you're behind the 8 ball and adversaries got more dwell time. Like all this bad stuff can happen from that. So we look at it and go, no. We understand. I say this, we comprehend. I'll say that with the knocking on the wood, because like we're imperfect humans, but to the extent that someone can, I feel like we comprehend this space. So we know the kinds of things that can happen. And I've done this before at a large SOC where we had 65 million unique alert titles, and we're trying to figure out what do we do with this? And we started doing fuzzy logic to try to boil that down. We boiled the ocean down to about 20,000 unique titles once we got some of that out of there. And like, that's good, but that's still crazy. And then as we started looking at it, my big aha moment, which I've since taken forward, and that's part of how we think about things here at WireSpeed, is there was only about 25 things that a SOC analyst would do with those cases. And so once you realize you're really just doing a pattern matching, you're just taking these things, you're breaking them down to smaller and smaller groups until you get it in the final category. And what we find is that both human analysts and the AI tools too tend to overanalyze. They tend to go farther than they need to go. Right? Like once I know that this is bad and I know my next step is just to contain this endpoint, or it's to kill a process, or it's to reset a credential, or it's to roll back a container that was just deployed in the cloud, or whatever the case is. Once I know what that is, just go do it. You don't need to go spend more time on that. You came to the conclusion. Congratulations. If you need to go beyond that, cool. You're now in forensics land, right? Like you can do that out of band. Take your time. You've contained a threat. So yeah, anyway, the soapbox topic for us for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it all comes down to assuming that you know everything there is to know about it. And I think it's a false assumption.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of these other, I come across that a lot, right? Is when I talk to founders and some of the people working in these early stages, is there's layers and layers of assumptions there from folks who are multiple steps removed from it, who have never done it themselves. And yeah, it's problematic. And then they meet the real world, right? So that term, I found it was coherent nonsense. And I love that term because I feel like it really explains the problem of I like it better than hallucination because, it's coherent, like it looks, and it's confidently presented to you. But it is still nonsense.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's move on to the quality bit here. So this is something that's always, again, this kind of dovetails right into the conversation we're having here, where really kind of understanding what those outcomes are that you're going after and not losing sight of that. We have a lot of busy work generators in security, where it can feel like you're doing something, like there's stuff to click, there's stuff to read, there's stuff to look at. But if you're not thinking about those outcomes that you're looking for, you can just waste a bunch of time. And there's programs I've seen entire teams where it's like, you could just send these guys home. You could just shut these machines down. Nobody will notice, no impact to risk for the org. It's might as well have been a research project, right? So you found something outside of cybersecurity that can maybe help with this. So tell us a bit about AQL.
Yeah. I think you and I probably both really like it when you find things outside that you can bring in. Mm-hmm. I think it's hilarious that we in cyber, we've been around, like, let's call it 30 years, being gracious. Yeah. If you want to go back to some of the academic papers in the 1960s and 70s, maybe. But as a
Nah.
practice, really, it's mostly like 20
30
years, 20, 25. And I think it's hilarious that we put these blinders on and go like, no, these are all new problems. No one's ever experienced these before or ever will
We're
again.
special.
We are special. So I spent some time before the AI thing, before anything else. We just knew like, hey, we're going to go down. We want to. The first thing we were trying to solve is we want to solve the triaging detections at scale as fast as we possibly can, and we want to get to the point where we're responding as fast as we possibly can, because the whole point is to disrupt an actual live threat actor as fast as we can, frustrate them, contain them, kick them out, make it painful for them so they move on to somebody else, right? That's the goal. I want to feel the frustration. I want to give the frustration to them that I got as a red teamer when my shell broke because the blue team contained us. I want to give that to everybody all the time and get the dopamine hits that come from that. It's just exciting. So we're going to go do this. Then we have to know that, A, there's got to be a way that people are going to trust it. Because trust is everything. We can't just let this thing run amok and just go and say, it's automated, it works, trust us. We have to be able to show it. So I started looking outside and we found AQL, which is acceptable quality limits. It's now an ISO standard. It's been around since the 1940s. It was, I'm not doing this on purpose, but I've got this nice little D-Day picture behind me. It was a World War II time frame. And it was, how do I ship munitions out in the field and know that the product, the collection of this, the sample, the lot, is going to work? So if you're in a firefight with Nazis, how do you know you're going to be able to shoot them, right? That's basically the gist of where it came from. And to fast forward, like your cell phone, the screen on your phone has gone through AQL. Your kids' toys go through AQL. Everything goes through AQL now. And it just is a process to randomly sample based on the lot size. So we're going to statistically take a small amount. So you don't have to look at everything. That's kind of an advantageous. And we can prove that it statistically represents the rest. And then we'll just look for critical, major, and minor flaws. And if this sounds all complex, we've got blogs on our site. We've got, if you go to wirespeed.co/AQL, we actually put the calculator thing that looks like a slide rule because it's from that era, but we made it easy to use and we created a hack for it to make it even easier if you read down through the site. But you can basically take a lot of things. So it could be, so Jack, you're talking about like doing detections. It could have been like, you got 10,000 detections that came back and you want to randomly sample these things to know the logic's working. You go through there and it tells you, oh, I need to pull this many. And then based on what level of quality you accept. And then you can go pull them. And then you just got to define what's a critical, major, and minor flaw. So for us, in our line of work, critical is something really bad happened. We didn't tell a customer about it. That's like game over. Someone's going to get hurt, right? So we don't want that to ever happen. So we have a zero tolerance for that. And we spot check and we randomly. And so then what happens is when you go through that process, if it fails the critical, major, or minor like thresholds, then you have to go hand adjudicate everything that's in there. You have to go assess everything. Just like if you're making kids' toys, you would go inspect if you found like a rough edge on a plastic toy and it can cut you, take the entire lot, go look to see do they all have it. Okay, we got to go scrap this entire lot if it's that bad, that sort of thing. But that's the gist of it. And it can be applied to pen tests. It can be applied to GRC. It can be applied to anything where you've got a process. You just got to go and say, what's critical, major, or minor to me? In my line of work, what's going to cause harm? That's critical. What's going to cause unsaleability is the major, meaning it's not good value to whomever's using the output of whatever it is you're doing. That would be a major. And then a minor would be like, it's just cosmetic. I don't like it. Doesn't make me proud that I've got these in here, but I'll tolerate more of those than the others. So for us, that might be like a mismatched field or something. But then you can go do that and you can go do it with pen test findings, GRC findings, whatever. So it's a gift that cyber's not used.
Yeah. And I think that's, there's minimal logic is required. So, I think for a lot of organizations, it's hard to do that kind of trade-off of like, okay, there's some very low risk stuff that's high volume, like internal traffic, things like that we really should automate because the amount of time it takes to undo something being blocked accidentally is minuscule compared to the time it takes to pay a low-level analyst to click dismiss until they get arthritis. And the biggest thing we talk about in security is burnout, right? Burnout. Our analysts are all burning out. And I think, thinking about the ROI on someone's time, elevating the value of the alerts that they're looking at by qualifying that these are alerts worth spending time on, I think helps from a psychological standpoint as an analyst to not feel like you're wasting, 80% of your time on low value stuff. So yeah, I definitely think block by default and undo it if it's, that kind of first initial tier is a much more effective way of doing things and makes everybody happier.
Yeah, it's definitely worth trying. right? At a minimum, I think you'll get better output at a minimum.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Creating, it's something I've talked to vendors for a long time about, like having a feedback loop, within their own products, with their customers, to see if the stuff they've built works at all. Like every time I've deployed a SIM, I've never found a single canned report that was useful out of the box. I throw away 100% of it and have to start from scratch. And it's just, even doing that a little bit, I feel like the quality of products could come up quite a bit.
I think that's part of why
Yeah,
SOAR
100%.
failed, is that the detections, the automations that come out of SOAR canned don't work, and it is something that has to be tuned, and nobody wants to, spend the man hours doing that when you have to justify budget for that. But yeah, I think that's why SOAR was promising, but then, if you can't put the back end time into it, it's never going to work to automate processes you haven't defined.
Yeah, and the hyper automation tools aren't going to help you either, because if you can't write it down in Confluence or whatever in natural language, you're not going to get anything magical in terms of output.
Right.
It's hard to
Step
automate.
one,
I tell this guy on this meeting every week.
Yeah, the UML, the pseudocode, right? Like you got to be able to describe it and understand the inputs and outputs and all that before you can hope to do any of that automation, right?
Yep, 100%.
All right. Well, this has been great. We do have links to a lot of what we're talking about. I think no less than 3 AQL links exist in the show notes for this interview, including the little calculator tool, which you absolutely should check out and play around with, and some great descriptions of why you chose it, why you're using it, how you're using it. So anybody, if we didn't cover enough here, check out the blog. There's more there. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk all things SecOps with Allie Mellon from Forrester.